in Ferguson, Missouri in 2014. There's a long history of tension, of antagonistic relations, of strained relations between the black community and the police. What we see today, of course, it is a building on that kind of legacy. It's a product of that legacy. When Michael Brown was killed in Missouri in 2014, many in our society, particularly in the black community, felt that it was a continuation of that, what had happened in 1955 with the killing of Emmett Till. And of course we saw Tamir Rice in Cleveland killed, Freddie Gray in Baltimore. So what we see today is a tragic part of that legacy of strained and tense relations between law enforcement and the black community. Interestingly enough, it has to do with, I think, a lot of things. First of all, I think, is that in this culture, in this history of this society, there's long been this view that blacks are somehow or another genetically predisposed to criminology. And that was certainly the view in the 18th and 19th centuries. And unfortunately, we're dealing with remnants of that in the 20th. We dealt with remnants of it in the 20th century and in the 21st century. So we are still dealing with strained relations, antagonistic relations between the black community and law enforcement. And the challenge, of course, has to do with how we overcome this long history, how we overcome this legacy of antagonistic and strained and tense relations between the African American community and the police.
Now that's a real question, Dr. Baldwin, and I think all of us are aware of this tension and the antagonism, but now the question that you raised is how do we overcome such things, and let's see if you can answer that for us.
Yes.
I think that's crucial, because I think that no matter what period we're dealing with, the ability to be able to overcome it ought to be the same. In many instances.
Martin Luther King Jr. taught us that violence creates violence, or violence leads to violence. And what we are seeing today, of course, is not only violence against police. We saw that in Dallas a couple of weeks ago with the alleged shooter, Michael Xavier Johnson. We saw that in Baton Rouge with the alleged shooter, Gavin Long. And we've also seen police misconduct and police violence against blacks. The killing of Philando Castile in Minneapolis, St. Paul, the killing of Alton Sterling in Baton Rouge. So what we are seeing today is this cycle of violence, not only on the side of the police, but also the African American community. So what we have to do is to try and come up with solutions that benefit both sides. And we have people on both sides of the spectrum today. There are those who say that the police are victims, and there are those who say that the African American community is victimized by this kind. But I think on both sides you find people who are victimized. So we have to come up with a voice of reason, a voice of objectivity that gives us solutions for both sides of the equation. And so far we have not come up with that.
And some people actually want to turn the clock back to earlier periods in terms of how Africans were treated and et cetera. And I think one of the real issues too is that the more freedom in a real sense, you know, when we started out as slaves, you know, we had no freedom. And so anybody outside of the slave community had the responsibility of what? Keeping Africans in their place. But as we move from one period to another, and then the 13th, 14th, and 15th, all of these amendments, but it really didn't change too many attitudes in reference to the overwhelming majority of attitudes that most whites had toward African Americans.
And we see that during the Civil Rights Movement with Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X and other voices of the civil. They spoke out against police brutality. They spoke out against racial profiling And they also called for more justice in the criminal justice system. So we're talking about a historic problem that we need to look at it in this larger historical context if we're going to address it. And I think that's very, very important. When many of us look at what's going on today with policing in the black community, we tend to look at it in a contemporary historical context or contemporary context. But we need to have more of a larger historical view of what's going on.
And have people understand that. As a matter of fact, I think that if we can create some, I guess we've created all the forums and all of the activities that we might need in terms of trying to bring about better race relations. But there has to be something that we can do, and there ought to be places for people of goodwill on both sides, African as well as the police department, to create that kind of goodwill.
Yes, and we need all institutions involved. We need religious institutions, churches, synagogues, mosques involved. We need fraternal orders of police involved. We need politicians involved, federal government involved, to create what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. called a kind of coalition of conscience. And if we have that kind of coalition of conscience, people from all sides coming at this issue, then I'm sure that we can come up with some solutions to the problems that divide. And what we're talking about is a divide between law enforcement and African-American communities.
And I think that when we look back over the history of that relationship, we can say in a real sense that we've come a long way. You know, because we don't have the hang-ins and et cetera that we used to have. But there's still a long way to go. But we have to understand that we've been able to overcome many of these things.
Because when I was a boy, when we saw policemen, we felt that they were the same as the Klan.
Okay, and so I think we're going to have a break, and then we're going to come back and continue this. We'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Sorry, Miss.